And now, please welcome President and CEO of Marriott International, Anthony Capuano, in conversation with Skift Editor-in-Chief Sarah Kopit.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming back from our networking break. It's so great to see all of you today. And Tony, hello, how are you?
I'm great, Sarah. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us across time and space from Australia here.
Well, it's great to be back with you. I wish our timing had aligned to be there in person. As I think you know, I was just in India 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I heard. So next time maybe, right?
I hope so.
All right, so let's jump right into it. I mean, it has been a bit of a harrowing week for business leaders, the markets, the US president's tariff plans have sent the S&P down 10%. Your counterparts in the airline industry have cut their forecast for 1Q. Is Marriott going to have to cut its forecast?
Well, I sure don't think so. We got a couple weeks left in the quarter, but the momentum we're seeing on a global basis, both in terms of occupancy and average rate growth, is really encouraging. So
a couple months ago when we did our Megatrends event, I did a very unscientific poll, did an anonymous poll of business leaders asking them about what they thought the Trump administration would do for their part of the travel business. At that point, it was overwhelmingly bullish, but that was predicated on a very strong economy. Now that the R word is being thrown around a little bit, recession, I'm wondering, A, if you think that the United States might head into a recession, and B, what that would mean for Marriott.
Yeah, it's a little hard to say. I mean, I think we've got to separate broad macroeconomic trends from the performance of the markets. The public markets thrive in times of stability and reliability. And I think the early portion of the Trump administration has provided neither of those. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of questions, certainly in the States, and I think around the world, as to whether the tariff approach is a real approach or it's a negotiating ploy. And time will tell which turns out to be the case, probably a little bit of both. So the markets and the public company stock performance, I think, is reflective of that volatility. That volatility, to your point, became more acute last week when some of our partners in the airline industry suggested they'd seen significant fall off in demand, particularly in the US. I think we're seeing a little different trend, but again, we're leasing our inventory daily, and so that can change relatively quickly. Will we see a recession? It's going to be, I'd almost hold my answer till we get through the end of first quarter earnings season. If we get through that season and we see strong corporate profits, we continue to see strong employment numbers, then I feel much more bullish about the economy. If, on the other hand, you see a real pullback on corporate profits, we may find ourselves in a different set of circumstances.
Do you think that there is going to be a pullback from U.S. inbound visitors? Do you think people are going to stop coming to the United States of America?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine on a wholesale basis. Now, there is some talk in Washington about reinstatement of some travel bans for certain countries. That's obviously not good news for collectively our business. There is some pullback we're seeing on the northern border as a reaction to some of the really tough tariff talk that's going on between the US and Canada today. So you could see some pullback there. Remember, Canada is the single biggest source market of inbound international travel to the US. So again, not great news. On the other hand, if you look back to our fourth quarter earnings call, about 20% of our global room nights are represented by cross-border travel. And we had actually returned to slightly above that volume that we saw pre-pandemic in 2019.
So let's pivot now to India. We have a bunch of owner-operators in the room here in the Indian market. And so I would like you to speak to them. For those who maybe hadn't considered Marriott since you took the helm, what's your 1-minute elevator pitch to them as to why Marriott?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with culture. When I think about growing with prospective owners and franchisees, and it's not us sitting in judgment, it's sitting down with those prospective partners and saying, do we have good cultural compatibility? Do we think similarly about how we take care of our associates? Do we think similarly about our commitment to providing warm, genuine care to our guests? Do we think similarly about the stewardship of the physical assets? And if both of us conclude that we do, then I would point them towards the breadth of the brand portfolio, the strength of the revenue engines, and the breadth and reach of the loyalty platform. And then as it relates specifically to India, I would talk about scale. Today, we enjoy the largest footprint as measured by rooms in India with almost 30,000 rooms, 155 hotels. We've got another 105 hotels with about 17,000 rooms in the pipeline beyond that. And today, India represents Marriott's fifth largest market globally. And I'm here in Australia with Raj Menon, our APEC president. Raj would tell you he has every expectation that India will move up those rankings and quickly get to a place where it's our third largest market globally.
So one of your signature moves has been kind of to get out of the way and try to cut the bureaucracy and not make, in a place like India, things go through like corporate headquarters, right? Has that worked for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much a work in progress. I'll give you one illustration, though, of how we're thinking about it philosophically. I was in Shenzhen 2 weeks ago, actually at the end of my India visit, to open our 600th hotel in China, a new St. Regis in Shenzhen. And afterwards, I did a town hall with about 1,000 of our Greater China associates. And one of the comments I made to them was, assembled in that room was the most extraordinary subject matter expertise. There was nobody in the world that knew more about developing, opening, staffing hotels in Greater China than the 1,000 people in that room. So why on earth would we not empower them to make decisions in real time rather than drag those decisions back to Bethesda, Maryland? And I think the same way about India. We have a terrific footprint of Indian national executives that have worked their whole career in India, developed that real expertise. We should empower them to make those decisions through a local market lens in real time.
So tell me about that market. What are you doing to lure Indian travelers to Marriott's?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with Bonvoy. The loyalty platform is powerful. It's powerful for a whole host of reasons, not the least of which, with a portfolio of more than 30 brands, it's really the connective tissue that helps us let those 240 million some odd members understand the breadth, not only of the brand portfolio, but the geographic footprint. 9,300 hotels.
Let me cut you off there, though, because the Bonvoy program was really meant for people like me, like Western corporate road warriors that are out there traveling around, getting loyalty points, staying at a Marriott. Do you think that it also works for the Indian leisure traveler?
Absolutely. And in fact, if you look at the evolution of the program, and I don't think we're unique in this, I think if you look across the sector, these programs started in their earliest days exactly as you described. They were for that 50 to 100 night a year road warrior, and they were pretty simple programs. They were intended to earn points for your stays and then redeem those points for future stays. As simple as that. Certainly at Marriott with Bonvoy, it's evolving to a much broader ecosystem of the ability to tap experiences, the ability to get small bites of redemption opportunities. I think about whether it's 1-point drops that we use or partnerships with partners like Starbucks. As we continue to try to enroll folks at the front desk, to the extent they say no, I'm always curious in the verbatims as to why. And to your point, you might get a guest that says, listen, I only travel twice a year. It's going to take me 100 years to earn enough points for a stay. Yeah. But when you can say, perhaps, but in 2 stays, you're going to have enough to get a free cup of coffee down the corner or to participate in one of these 1-point drops to go to a Taylor Swift or now a Beyonce concert, then those are really compelling reasons to be part of the platform.
So I've been here in India for like 4 days now, and I really must say, I didn't realize how much I personally went on TikTok until I came to India, because I can't go on TikTok here in India. It's blocked.
Probably been your most productive 4 days in years, right? You take all that time, you spend doom scrolling, and you're getting work done. It's fabulous. You say that, you know, their algorithm is remarkable. My eldest daughter just got engaged. So
Yeah.
all I see on TikTok now is father of the bride speeches.
Yeah, exactly. Apparently, I really like dancing. So anyway, how are you thinking about marketing in India, especially to younger people? Although, I mean, I'm looking at it, I am not younger people. You know, what's your platform of choice here on the subcontinent when you can't use TikTok?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is local market kind of, old style sales and marketing. And you may know I had the good fortune to spend some time with Prime Minister Modi 2 visits ago. And we talked at length. You know, he was quite interesting. He said, please, I know you have a terrific footprint in the primary cities. Thank you, but I'm not that interested. What I want to talk about is your growth plans as you move into secondary and tertiary markets. He was quite keen to learn that today we operate in 40 cities across India. And I think the breadth of that geographic footprint allows us to send our message around what Marriott represents in terms of product and service to a much broader cross-section of the Indian traveler.
That was a nice pivot, Tony, not answering my question. That's good.
I did answer your question. That's how we do it. We're in those markets where those Indian travelers are living and working. And as a result, we get the opportunity to expose them to what Marriott Hospitality represents.
All right, so for the hotel nerds in the audience, raise of hands. Hotel nerds? Oh, good, excellent. We have a whole bunch here. So there's a very different model. There are two different models here. You know, you've got the franchise model and you've got the management model for hotels. You know, think Starbucks versus Subway. I will give you a fun fact. In a former life, I was a franchise attorney. This is a more fun job. I will tell you that. And so that has a very different fee structure. Is Marriott more willing to work with Indian owners and operators in their desired structure?
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you, I just celebrated my 30-year anniversary with the company. And in 1995, the company had a very strong bias towards managed. We were in our infancy in terms of franchising. And even in the US, we were in our infancy. If you looked outside the US 30 years ago, it was almost entirely managed. You fast forward to today, certain international markets continue to be disproportionately weighted towards managed, but I think there is a much broader acceptance of how the owner community has evolved and the importance to pivot in some cases to a franchise model. And I think particularly in a market like India, where we hope to grow across some of these tertiary markets, likely the franchise model is a better strategy to accelerate that growth. If we can find the right franchise partners who have those shared values, I think we're absolutely open to growth through franchising.
So you mentioned that you just met with the Prime Minister. What do you think? Well, first, what do you guys talk about other than the tertiary cities? Yeah. And what do you think the government needs to do more here in India to help the hospitality industry?
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot. It was, it was very impressive. As I was walking into the residence, the team was saying, if you get 15 minutes, you should consider the meeting a success. The Prime Minister was very generous. We had well over an hour. We talked about tertiary city growth. We talked about some of the initiatives Marriott has to grow female employment across the country, which is a big priority for the Prime Minister. And we talked about, you may know, my predecessor, Arne Sorensen, had a wonderful relationship with Prime Minister Modi. And every time they got together, they talked about trying to remove friction from the development process in terms of bureaucracy and entitlements and approvals. And so we talked about that as well. And maybe I'd put that near the top of the list. I think for the administration to continue to make progress, to eliminate friction from the development process, in those states where you don't have infrastructure designation for hospitality. That's a big priority and I think a real enabler for the acceleration of growth. And then the other thing we really talked about, and I still marvel at this number, as we met with government officials 2 weeks ago, the hope is that inbound international visitors to India will be about 10.7 million, I think was the number that was being discussed. You contrast that with a destination like Japan, where they're approaching 40 million. We talked a lot about what India can do, again, to remove now friction from an international traveler's perspective, to drive inbound international visitation as well. And, there's lots of good signs. I think certainly the amount of investment you're seeing from the public sector in new airports and from Air India in terms of the hundreds of new aircraft that they're buying, that's quite encouraging. I was in Hyderabad during my last visit, and you look at the amount of multinationals coming in, making technology investments in that city is great news. We talked a lot with the Prime Minister about leveraging the demographic advantage that India enjoys. And you look at so many other competitive destinations around the world that are really struggling with headwinds from a demographic perspective. And India's got the opposite advantage, and I think that's something that can be leveraged.
Oh, I read a statistic that it takes 7 years to build a hotel in India. So that's about 2x the time that it typically does. How does Marriott deal with that? And is that a real detractor for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the great advantages of our asset light model. We have 9,300 hotels globally. We own 20. And if I were there in person, I'd be trying to sell those 20 to your audience. But when you look at how we grow, it's with local partners. And so India can be a challenging environment, particularly if you don't have deep relationships and deep expertise in growing across India. The fact that the vast majority of our portfolio and pipeline are owned by Indian partners, I think is probably the best strategy to try to navigate the complexities that you describe.
So I have kind of a fun question now. Kind of.
All right.
Yeah. So Indian weddings. Indian weddings are huge. I mean, yay,
Yeah.
Indian weddings. But a lot of Indians are going outside of India to get married. Do you have a strategy for keeping Indians in India and having their weddings at Marriott's?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing, you're exactly right. And as I talk to our teams, part of it is just capacity, right? The volume of demand is overwhelming the supply of reasonably sized venues, given the scale of many of these Indian weddings. But right before I left India, I was at the JW Marriott Aero City at Delhi Airport, and we toured the under construction Marriott Marquis there. That hotel will have India's largest ballroom. It's a 4,000 square meter ballroom. We had a chance to tour it. The hotel will open next year. And so one of the strategies, candidly, is whether it's urban destinations like that, aggressively trying to grow the company's resort portfolio, providing more and more venues that make sense, I think in some ways is the strongest lever we can pull to keep Indian weddings in India.
We like to talk also about live tourism at Skift a lot. That's, people traveling for sports and concerts and Taylor Swift, that's why. How do you feel, what have you seen from live tourism at Marriott? Do you think it's something that will continue to grow? Is it something that you're baking into your strategy about how to get those travelers?
Yeah, no question. In fact, it's interesting. Years ago, I think like many of our peers, the sponsorship dollars that we deployed tended to be disproportionately weighted towards sports. And to be sure, our hundreds of millions of members love sports in some cases. But as we applied a data analytics lens to their preferences, what we saw is some of them could not care less about sports. And they indexed pretty equally in sports, music, and food and beverage. And so we think about whether it was our sponsorship of Taylor Swift's Eras tour. We're now doing a similar program for Beyonce's new global tour, leveraging the breadth of our food and beverage portfolio around the world. I absolutely believe that's one of those trends that's here to stay. I mean, with the Secretary of Commerce in the US, we were talking about the US preparing for events like the World Cups and the Olympics. In 2024, US travelers spent $52 billion on sports-related travel, and I don't think that's a US-centric trend. When I arrived in Mumbai 2 weeks ago, it was a ghost town, and it was a ghost town because everybody was watching India, Pakistan playing cricket.
Yep.
And so I think it's a really powerful global trend.
I'm going to take a couple of questions from the audience here. What lessons from the Indian market could influence Marriott's global strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we talk to our members and talk to our travelers, what they want is local and authentic. And I think the hospitality in India, hospitality industry in India may do that better than anybody. India offers such a diverse, rich set of destinations, and each one you have the privilege to visit. You get an authentic immersion into food and history and culture and architecture. And I think that's something we've really got to try to lean in on globally.
So India also has this tremendous talent pool in tech and AI. How is Marriott basically taking advantage of that and using it to bolster your company?
Yeah, it's one of the things we're most excited about. When I was there 2 weeks ago, I went to Hyderabad and visited our new tech accelerator, which is an investment we're making in India to really accelerate the company's technology expertise. As I think you know, we're in the midst of the biggest technology transformation in our history, replatforming our three most important systems. And the talent that we're able to tap into now with this tech accelerator, I think is going to be a big part of our success in that initiative.
So if you could wave a magic wand, what would be your big wish for India? If you could change like one big thing to make your business more successful than it already is here in India, what would it be?
Yeah, it would have to be a big magic wand because it would be to eliminate friction. And I use that word because it's a good umbrella word, but friction in terms of the ability to quickly and efficiently get entitlements, get approvals so you can speed up the pace at which you can add supply. Remove friction for inbound international visitors to come and explore all that India has to offer. For that matter, eliminate friction for outbound Indian travelers that want to go to destinations like the United States, and today they wait 300 to 400 days to get visas. So I would look at trying to eliminate friction from every part of the travel experience and the hotel development experience. And
is much of that the government bureaucracy that we kind of talked about before?
I think it's some of it, but I also think it's the biggest successes we see around the world in travel and tourism are more often than not the result of a really deliberate partnership between public and private sector. And I think in India, we've got to keep pushing on how we can better partner. I try to go once a quarter and meet with the Indian ambassador to the US in DC and explore ways, even incrementally to try and eliminate some of that friction.
Interesting question from the audience. What are your thoughts about the rebirth of Starwood hotels?
Yeah, it's I think it's great. Barry deserves a really prominent place in the history and lore of our industry. Much like Bill Marriott, people will look back a century from now and say, look at the power of the innovations that he had. It's been sort of interesting to me. Even when Starwood existed as a hotel company, Barry still owned the name. He actually licensed the name to the hotel company. Yeah. So when he made the announcement, everybody, either concluded we'd missed it in the due diligence or, he'd paid us a fortune for it. And we said, we absolutely expected this. And Barry's a good friend and a colleague. He owns lots of Marriott hotels. And he and his team were fabulous. They called us a year ahead of time, said, we intend to do this. Let's make sure we don't inadvertently step on each other's toes. I said in an interview the other day, in some ways, it's a validation of the strategy all the big multinationals have. We all have these broad kind of diverse portfolios of brands, and you want some sort of umbrella to tie them together. For us, it's Bonvoy. For Barry, with 1 hotels and Baccarat and Treehouse and everything else, the Starwood name will similarly allow him to pull those together.
So bring out your crystal ball. Like, let's just go. I mean, it's so hard right now, so hard. Let's go out 5 years. Let's go out 5 years. What is Marriott doing? What does Marriott look like here in India?
Yes, so it will most certainly 5 years from now be our third biggest market in the world. We'll have several hundred hotels. We will continue the momentum we enjoy in upper upscale and luxury. We had our biggest development year in history last year. We signed 40 plus deals, 7,000 rooms, but about 75% of those were in the upper upscale and luxury tier. I think that momentum will continue. At the same time, not in lieu of, but in addition to, you'll see us continue to look at the lower end of the chain scales and create more and more opportunities for more value conscious inbound international travelers and domestic Indian travelers. And hopefully we will have had some small part in eliminating both the development and visitor friction that I described.
All right, Tony. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, all the way from Australia. Hopefully next time it'll be in person. Thank you so much.
I hope so.
Yes.
Thanks for having me.
All right.